Hey everybody, welcome to the Grayzone. We're here a little bit later than usual, but we're here. We made it on another Friday. And as always, it's been an insane week in the information wars. We're also now live on Rockfin. And we want to talk about what everyone in official Washington is talking about, the leaks, of which we were one of the first publications to actually publish real images and screenshots. We might have been, thanks to Alex Rubenstein, our contributor. Now, I'm usually joined by Aaron Mate, award-winning Canadian journalist Aaron Mate. But right now, Aaron is traversing the mountains of Utah. He's somewhere out there in Mormon country with the senior Mate, Gabor Mate, and Daniel Mate. I've never said Mate so many times, but at least I pronounced it right. And he is not due to arrive anywhere near Wi-Fi connection for like another hour or so. So I decided to bring in some special guests, some of the better journalists I know working today, who are just older, like slightly older than the leaker, and just as talented and proficient. Alex Rubenstein is one of them. Alex, welcome. And then we got Wyatt Reed, American journalist Wyatt Reed. Alex, where are you at right now?
I'm in Mexico, in an undisclosed location. I gotta say the way you described what Aaron's doing, it sounds like he's gonna come back with leaked documents from like some black site with aliens.
Yeah, it's like Mark Wahlberg and Sniper or Shooter. What was the movie Shooter? Have you ever seen that?
You're talking to guys that are a little bit older than the leaker, so
right. It's a pretty subversive film.
The NSA has like a big, huge facility out there, right? Maybe he's literally backdooring it.
Yeah, and you got some pretty significant air bases out there. But Aaron is just hiking with his father and brother, and it's like the rare time when they can.
I've heard that cover story before.
Yeah, it's like the Mark Sanford story. He was hiking the Appalachian Trail. So yeah.
Well, he's got reliable witnesses though, with an obvious incentive to manipulate on his behalf. But whatever.
Got Gabor Mate fresh off his psychotherapy session with Prince Harry, so it'll be interesting to check in about the family. But yeah, Wyatt, where are you?
I'm in Virginia, in an undisclosed location, but not in a weird way.
No, you have like a normal background. Alex looks like he's about to do like one of those like final ISIS videos before he does a VBIED attack. Like you can't really tell where he is. But maybe Bellingcat could track you all down based on like the tile in your kitchen floor,
the lighting,
the formica.
Yeah.
There's like the dandruff on your pillow. I mean, they're just such brilliant investigators, and they never get anything handed to them by the intelligence services.
No, never.
And they're funded by the U.S. government through the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a spinoff of the CIA. It was literally founded on the initiative of William Casey, Ronald Reagan's CIA director. Back in 1982, he sent a letter, which you can all find online. Thanks to the late Bob Parry at Consortium News, he went into the Reagan archives and found the letter that Casey sent to Ed Meese, the attorney general at the time, proposing an endowment for democracy to, mobilize opposition forces and do what they do to meddle in other countries where the U.S. seeks regime change. And then they were supposed to, when they formed this group with Karl Gershman, this former Trotskyist who went into basically U.S. intelligence after working in the office of then UN Ambassador Jeane Kirkpatrick, who was super gung-ho about the dirty wars in Central America. Gershman was supposed to seal off the NED from the CIA and sign some vow not to have any CIA officials working for them or CIA assets working in their office. But that was demanded by the Senate, by some of the few anti-war Democrats in the Senate. And they basically worked out a compromise around that. And since then, the NED has been basically an intelligence cutout. And it sponsors Bellingcat to the tune of something like $150,000 a year. It's their main donor. And Alex, you got a message from the communications director of the National Endowment for Democracy like 2 weeks ago, and we had a phone call with her. I mean, I don't want to sell out our story, and we still are waiting for some responses from her, but we had a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was. I was blindsided by it, as I think you were, because we've all been talking about the National Endowment for Democracy for quite a few years now. But it was a woman by the name of Leslie Aun, pleasant woman, VP of Communications, who wanted to push back on our characterization of the NED as a cutout of the CIA. And so over the course of 45 minutes, we had an in-depth discussion on that topic. I don't think I'm revealing too much to say that she wasn't able to give us any concrete answers to our questions off the bat. We're still awaiting follow-up responses. We'll see how that goes, and we'll get some information out there to people.
Yeah, basically her main, we were wondering why, like, what were they going to do? Like, call in a JSOC team on us, or what did they want? Like, why would they want to actually reach out to us? And what she wanted to do is convey the message that, hey guys, we're not the CIA, bro. We're cool. We're like just civil society, pro-democracy folks.
Yeah.
We spread democracy to some folks over there. And I started to deliver some of the history that I just gave right now to her, and she had never heard of any of it. And she was like completely dumbfounded. And then, you know, we started asking more questions about the intelligence ties of the NED, and also whether they support organizations or individuals who justify political violence or actually commit political violence. And I gave several examples, including Bellingcat, who you wrote about, Alex. Bellingcat's Russia director actually justified the terror attack in St. Petersburg that killed a journalist, straight up murdered a war reporter.
Yeah. He
Vladimir
characterized
Tatarsky in the middle of a cafe, and you know, this cat
during a public event.
Yeah.
He called the victim a legitimate target. He said that the cafe was arguably not a purely civilian location. Again, open during a public event, and I went to this cafe's pages on Google and Yelp and crap like that, and you could see all the photos that people had posted there over the years, you know, of them, you know, doing limbo and just like general, you know, civilian shenanigans.
Real ISIS stuff, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Secret Wagner rituals, I'm sure. But you know, it's really
straight up. It's like Osama bin Laden stuff, you know. It's the kind of like that is literally the justification that bin Laden used, right? He said those people weren't innocent in the World Trade Center because they were participants in the, you know, U.S. economic exploitation of the Middle East. It's the same argument,
right?
And once you embrace that rationale, you can pretty much justify anything, you know. Max, I wanted to ask though, like this woman had never heard that famous quote about how so much of what we, what we do now would have been done by the CIA 20 years ago. I'm butchering the quote, but she hadn't heard that quote. Is that what you're saying?
That's how Alex started the call by reading that quote to her.
Well, she had, and I said, I'm sure you're familiar with these quotes, and she said that she was familiar, and I believe that the word she used was haunted. Those quotes have been haunting us for like the better part of 10 years or something like that.
Haunting.
I don't quote me on it because
haunted by their own words. That's a great
exact phrasing. But
two of their founders said, we do overtly what the CIA used to do covertly, like we do.
Right.
Two of the NED's founders. And that's part of what Bellingcat is, along with all of the civil society groups that have carried out violent riots and attempted regime change operations from Nicaragua to Venezuela to Hong Kong to across Eastern Europe through the color revolutions. I mean, and she really
She didn't know the history. She knew the
didn't
quotes,
know
but
the
she didn't know
history
the
at all.
history. Yeah.
She just knew that quote. So anyway, we'll be dropping all that, but we want to get Leslie's responses and be fair, because I think we had some important questions that the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, has never accounted for regarding its relationship with U.S. intelligence. And it's important because, we'll try to get to this later, this comment, but thank you, Kashif, this question. But it's important because Bellingcat has surfaced again in one of the most consequential stories of the year so far. And it relates to the leak of classified Pentagon documents. Now, before we get into the media's response and how the corporate media, along with the intel cutout known as Bellingcat, hunted down the leaker zealously, scooping the FBI, we should at least cover some of the key takeaways from the leaks as you all see it. Because Alex, you were one of the first out of the gate in independent media on this, right after the New York Times decided to report the existence of the leaks, which was odd, in my opinion, since, we've had so many leaks at the Grayzone on the war, really significant leaks. Kit Clarenberg publishing leaks on, for example, British intelligence classified documents showing plans to bomb the Kerch Bridge. I mean, we've had more leaks than my kid's diaper, and none of the mainstream media would talk about this. None of them would touch it. So the New York Times suddenly decides that they're going to cover this. The Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post are racing to cover it, but they're blurring out the images. But Alex, you produced the images, you found them. And I mean, what do you all think were some of the key takeaways, and how do you see these leaks affecting the course of the war?
You can start, Wyatt, if you like.
Yeah, well, obviously, some of the main takeaways are really just the confirmations of what we already knew. We knew that this is a United States proxy war against Russia, and this confirmed that. We saw basically that the United States isn't even giving the Ukrainians the war plans that it's drawing up for them, right? So they basically they're the hand. The Ukrainians are the glove. That's the kind of relationship that we saw. We saw special operations forces, almost 100 of them coming from a number of countries in Western Europe and the United States. The top country, I believe, was the United Kingdom in terms of the number there. We saw the revelation that, contrary to the dramatic and extremely optimistic rhetoric that we hear from the Department of Defense, we found out that the Kiev regime is actually losing. Its best case scenario is more or less a stalemate, and that was kind of the prognosis contained in these documents. So that was just on the strategic sense. I think that was kind of the main stuff. Also, obviously, the fact that Zelensky was considering strikes well into the Russian mainland, into Rostov-on-Don, an important transportation hub where almost all of the people who are going to and from the Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic are going to transit through there at some point, including, obviously, military supplies at some point as well. So in terms of the strategy, I think that was kind of the main stuff. We found out that at a very high level, the United States government is effectively taking the Ukrainians at their word when it comes to casualty figures, that they are reprinting even in February or March of 2023 that the Ukrainians have taken less than 20,000 killed in action. Just a fantastical, totally ludicrous number. And then some of the other stuff that was important, obviously related to the United States spying on its ostensible allies, not the least of which was Israel. The Mossad stands accused in these documents of having somehow participated in these anti-Netanyahu demonstrations. I think that's mainly what I had in mind. Oh, the South Korean situation, I think that's pretty important as well in terms of the spying. We saw a statement in the past couple of days by the leader of South Korea's main opposition party, who said if the report about spying is true, quote, it would be an action that can never be acceptable between allies of 70 years and an infringement on sovereignty and diplomatic foul play that breaks the bilateral trust head on. So that's my roundup of some of the main stuff.
Alex, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think Wyatt got just about everything there, but I would add that CNN reported the U.S. spying on Zelensky, and I think the big thing is this supposedly upcoming spring counteroffensive, the prospects being not so great according to the U.S. government documents. One has to wonder what's the point of continuing to arm Ukraine when this all-important counteroffensive is not looking good in the eyes of the U.S. It's a pretty sick situation in my view.
Yeah, I mean, there was the latest Washington Post coverage of the coming spring offensive. About the headline says, Ukraine's feeling out the Russians, getting ready. But then if you actually read the piece and get deep into the body of the piece, there are photographs of just these expansive Ukrainian cemeteries, the kind of which you see video of going around on social media, just these endless cemeteries with Ukrainian flags of dead soldiers, like the experienced soldiers, the frontline soldiers. And then you see quotes by soldiers who are totally demoralized. I mean, this is in the Washington Post, and you've had numerous articles about Ukraine running out of munitions. There was a Pentagon leak about that as well, which obviously the Ukrainians are going to try to leverage that to get munitions and get more arms shipments, but
yeah, we even I was going to say, we even saw over the past few days, there have been a number of reports suggesting that this spring counteroffensive may not materialize until the summer or the fall. I saw, I think, a Bloomberg report that said it might be pushed back to 2024. So, if you're one of those people kind of on the fence about whether or not these are real or plant these documents, I guess that would be some kind of compelling evidence that this was sort of pushed out there with the idea to maybe we can kind of transition, segue people into this new reality where we might be giving up on Ukraine in a way that seemed unthinkable just a few months ago.
Right. Now that's the next question or next issue we should cover is the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. They're not going to do anything without a green light from someone in the White House, Pentagon, State Department. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. They're not going to go out and do this independently. So what signal were they getting? Was it that that some mandarins in the national security state are trying to create momentum for an exit ramp from this war, which obviously isn't going their way?
I missed the question. I lagged out. I'm sorry.
I'm compelled to believe that, yeah, that's the probably the most likely kind of scenario here. And my guess, if I had to make it, was that because obviously we're talking about a 21-year-old airman first class. He's an enlisted guy. He's not an officer, right?
Right.
You really have to wonder how this guy had access to such high-level documents. I saw the theory put forward in the New York Times that perhaps that it was common that people would forward things that they received automatically, that perhaps some daily briefing some colonel is getting made its way to him. That sounds, I think, a little bit more plausible. And it actually could realistically work in both scenarios. They could use some colonel to feed intel to somebody that the colonel wants to get out there, right? He doesn't want to have his hands dirty. But he knows that this dumbass kid is maybe telling his friends on the internet about what he's telling him. That is kind of probably the most likely plausible or scenario I would consider plausible for this plant theory. That some colonel, presumably of kind of the Matt Gaetz conservative variety, whose main issue with the proxy war with Russia is that it's detracting from what they think should be our main focus, which is the proxy war with China, right? So that would kind of be my guess if I had to say, this has been fed to this kid for some specific reason. That's how I would wrap my head around it, I guess.
Well, I'm not going to take any guesses. I didn't serve in the military. I'm not going to pretend to have advanced knowledge of how security clearances function, like who gets what security clearance and what access they get. I know people who've gotten security clearances who are just working in IT in Northern Virginia, who are just like guys I hang out with, like my drinking buddies or whatever.
A lot of these documents were top secret.
Yeah. I was going to say the documents highly classified, top secret, labeled no foreign, meaning no foreign nationals can have eyes on it. And it somehow lands up in the hands of a 21-year-old who doesn't look like, at a first glance, doesn't appear to be the healthiest individual in the world. And all I can think of is the situation with Reality Winner and the school of thought that a school of thought that was around that situation where you had documents that were favorable to the national security industry, and they somehow landed up in the hands of somebody who was, in that case, ideological, and in this case, reckless and potentially mentally unstable.
Well, like the way he's presented first in the Washington Post profile of him, because they scored an interview with one of his buddies in the Discord chat group, in the Thug Shaker chat group, is that he was just trying to, his name was OG. He was just trying to be the OG. He was 21 and he was dealing with a bunch of teenagers. So he wanted to show that he was kind of the spiritual leader and that he had inside access to everything that was happening in the national security state, and therefore could essentially predict history with some kind of Nostradamus. And then of course we'll talk about this more, but they go and present him as a white supremacist or something, because him and a bunch of guys in a Discord server made off-color jokes. They made like ugly jokes, which is obviously designed to just paint him.
They said there was some video that shows him saying racial and anti-Semitic slurs, but they haven't published the video for some reason.
That's par for the course with this story, is that nothing gets published. It all gets filtered through the editorial team at the New York Times.
Yeah, and it appears well, before we get to that, here's a new disclosure since he's been in court. Airman Jack Teixeira has been in court, so we know a little bit more about him. And Michael Tracy noted this facet of his background, that the leaker was assigned to a subunit of the 102nd Intelligence Wing, which runs drone operations out of Otis Air Force Base in Cape Cod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is, they run the Reaper drones that were flying over the Black Sea, one of which was downed by a Russian MiG last month. So he's given some pretty weighty responsibility, as was Reality Winner, who was in Georgia and was just a contractor. And it turns out, Reality Winner was heavily involved in drone assassinations.
But I don't think this guy was a drone operator, right? He was like a tech guy. He was like
he was an IT guy.
Right. So that's, to me, like there might be a connection there, but like none of that would necessitate getting really any information at all to be able to operate a reconnaissance drone. Like what do you need to know about like the force, composition of something happening, and you're surveilling Crimea, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't seem like the kind of information that I can think, in terms of a need to know basis, that even a drone unit would need most of this information.
Mossad helping to foment anti-Netanyahu protests. It doesn't make any sense.
Some of the stuff in the documents clearly benefited the U.S., like this Russia secretly cutting deals with Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the dictator of the military junta leader of Egypt, to supply 20,000 rockets. First of all, the Egyptian military is It's under complete surveillance by the US due to the Camp David Accords. The whole point of the Egyptian military is to prevent anyone from actually waging war on Israel in a meaningful way. The Egyptian military is basically engaged in a deal with the US to secure Israel's qualitative military edge. And the idea that it could secretly supply rockets to Russia in such a high quantity, it just doesn't add up to me. And it suggests that the US was actually either planting information in these documents or just dumping documents at their own convenience in order to embarrass Cairo and weaken Sisi, who's someone that I know they don't really like in the Biden administration.
Yeah, I mean that's the point I was going to make is that they're the number 2 recipient, or I guess number 3 now, right? Behind Ukraine, Israel, and of U.S. foreign aid, I should say. So what are they going to give them? They're going to give them American rockets, like, you know,
right?
When it's like they get F-15s, but they're like repurposed. They're designed so that they don't have the latest systems, so they can't compete with whatever Israel gets. It's inferiority by design, and the military is primarily there to function as a force of repression against Egypt and other Arab states, if necessary, against Egyptian citizens. So
you would view that though as potentially like a shot against the bow, like across the bow, I should say. Like, you know, here's.
I'm just saying, there's plenty in there that served U.S. interests.
Sure,
it wasn't like Cablegate, which just blew up everything that the State Department was trying to do with its regime change operations during the Arab Spring and across the world. I mean, we've used so many documents from Cablegate in Latin America and elsewhere. It wasn't like the Snowden disclosures, which magically disappeared thanks to Omidyar's purchase of them. But, you know, it just wasn't as damaging to the national security state. And I can understand why people would see Jack Teixeira, this 21-year-old in the National Guard, as a patsy. But again, I don't know enough about security clearances and who gets to see what through which cables.
I also just think the story's like really weird. So he got into an argument with some guy on this gaming Discord channel and decided to take pictures of 100 documents to prove he's gonna.
No, so he took the documents. Another person with access to them in the Discord server plucked them from that server and then used them on 4chan to try to win an argument with somebody who was pro-Russia. Okay. And he said, "Look, I've got the documents right here that show, you know, that so and so."
How embarrassing! I mean, if that's true, how embarrassing that that's how all this information came out.
Well, he obviously didn't mean to leak it, or at least that's what's being reported. Then the interview with the source is weird as well. I want to bring it up, but I actually am being paywalled here by the Washington Post. But our friend Chris Kruger just pointed out that it sounded like he was being coached. Okay, they get this 17-year-old, they blur out his face, and they interview him. And this is after Bellingcat had located the Thug Shaker group and pinpointed it as the source of the leaks. So basically they already knew they were going to go down to the feds. So this 17-year-old talks. What's taking place here is like a interrogation by the FBI being carried out by journalists. So it's obviously in this kid's interest to cooperate and to sell his friend out and provide as much information to these journalists as possible to show essentially that he's a cooperative witness to the FBI because he knows they're going to be at his door soon after the Washington Post.
3 hours later.
3 hours later. Well, so that should really color this interview and show that this young person who is a minor is basically being intimidated into talking to the Washington Post. I mean, that's highly unethical along with everything else these journalists did. And what he said, it first of all, destroyed one of the main claims by U.S. officials, which was that Russia was actually behind this, We first heard a week ago that 3 U.S. officials telling us that this is Reuters just uncritically reporting it. This is that ad.
So this
down.
is
Russia
It's the
likely
AP
behind
all over again.
US
The wires are taking L after L. I mean, between the AP reporting based off U.S. officials that Russian artillery had struck Poland. Now you have this very quickly debunked article from Reuters.
Because they just the three U.S. officials look. Russian or pro-Russian elements are likely behind the leak of several classified U.S. military documents posted on social media that offer a partial months-old snapshot of the war in Ukraine. 3 U.S. officials told Reuters.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, 3 U.S. officials can't be wrong. And by the way,
they never lead with that, right? They always bury the fact that it's a handful of unnamed, anonymous U.S. officials. That's like in paragraph, at the very least, it's at the end of the paragraph. Maybe you won't even find out till paragraph 3 or 4. And they write it up totally straight, completely credulous every time.
Yeah, and there's of course no repercussions for getting it wrong. I mean, the only person who suffered for the false AP story was the reporter who got shit canned for it, but he never outed his source, which to me is just like the ultimate cuck move. Like, to get fired for getting a story wrong, and then you won't give up your U.S. government source who fed you the false information.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to give up a source, you should tell people who lied to you.
Right.
But it's the other way around.
Especially when it's a U.S. government official.
You're getting burned by your source, like burn back. I don't know.
It's pathetic. And a U.S. official can be a Senate or like a House staffer. It could be anyone that Reuters got it from. Pro-Russian. Oh, it could be pro-Russian sources. So anyway, Jack Teixeira doesn't appear to be even pro-Russian, according to his buddies in Thug Shaker Group. He doesn't even appear to be very ideological. But of course, they painted him as a white supremacist and anti-Semite because you're supposed to be put on trial for your views in the U.S. now and not for any crimes you commit. And they're going to add on like 7 extra years if he turns out to be anti-trans, I think. I don't know if that's the right number.
The thing is, like, the only actual kind of quote I even found or evidence in terms of like the racism angle was the Washington Post wrote that he told members of his group online that the U.S. government, here's a quote from the Washington Post, quote, knew in advance that a white supremacist intended to go on a shooting rampage at that supermarket that was frequented by black shoppers in Buffalo that left 10 black shoppers dead. But, quote, let the killings proceed so they could argue for increased funding. So like that doesn't, I don't know, that doesn't strike me as like a white supremacist talking point. That like the U.S. government is actually killing black people so that it can like,
if we're gonna
get, more black buy-in in terms of like defunding the police or something like that seems like not a white supremacist theory, but I don't know.
Look, every Zoomer who isn't like completely blue-pilled is highly skeptical of everything they hear. And they all think like that, those that I know. So none of this is out of the ordinary for me. And I mean, I got to wonder, I mean, I guess it's not true. Was there a document to correspond to that?
We don't know because they're not publishing anything,
Right. And
that
by the way,
particular claim or which claim?
Was there a document to correspond?
No. Well, no. So this
I know I haven't seen it. I'm just saying,
in terms of the story that I read, this was before he started photographing the documents, because ostensibly previously he was just transcribing them and then telling the members of his group, and then they lost interest because it wasn't flashy enough. So he started, this is how the story goes. He started photographing them and uploading them, and they're, have graphics and colors, and they're much more interesting to look at. And that re-engaged.
I mean, even the choice by the Washington Post to paraphrase rather than directly quote him on that is interesting because it gives you no insight into his actual mental state, his level of awareness of what he's describing.
Right.
It's just again filtered through the editorial board.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that that was, according to the official narrative, that was something that was communicated to them prior to him photographing switching to photographing the documents.
Right. But it's the same way that Assange was demonized as a racist, anti-feminist or whatever, and wiping feces all over the walls. That's why he was kicked out of the embassy. It's very similar. And I'm not saying that this leaker is equal to Assange or even Chelsea Manning, but they're trying to color the trial.
That's what the New York Times immediately said in their big profile of him. They said that Airman Teixeira was no whistleblower, you know.
Well,
period.
here's
The point. Like,
this is interesting. Dmitry Alperovich actually compared him negatively to Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, Joshua Schultz, who leaked the Vault 7 files to WikiLeaks, Reality Winner, who, you know, was pushed a bunk document trying to hype up Russiagate to The Intercept and got arrested. Whoever this military docs on Discord leaker is, but he knows on April 9th that it's a young person. What is going on with the young people in this country that they feel it is okay to publicize highly sensitive and operational classified information? This guy is supposed to be, you know, he's the guy who was hired by the DNC to investigate Russia's supposed exfiltration of data by Russian hackers of the DNC server. And his business partner who co-founded CrowdStrike with him, former FBI agent Sean Henry, admitted that they have no proof. Under oath, he admitted this. He had to go under oath. He admitted they had no proof that any data had been exfiltrated from the DNC server, which itself no longer exists. And so you can see this is the official narrative. It's just that leakers are bad. They're all evil. We don't want to know. We want to cover up for the state. And Dmitry Alperovich depends on the state and the intelligence services for his paycheck. So it doesn't matter if he's Snowden, Assange, whatever. They're all evil. And that's the way the press treated this. Now, Bellingcat was essentially first to nail the Thug Shaker group as the source of the leaks. And I call them Bellingcat. It's like, it's never been more clear that that name has been appropriate. Here's Bellingcat taking a victory lap. Bellingcat's Eric Toller worked with the New York Times to uncover a trail of digital evidence that appears to identify Jack Teixeira, 21-year-old Air National Guardsman, as the leader of an online gaming chat group where U.S. intelligence documents leaked. Okay, within like seconds of the New York Times article. Well, actually, here's a funny tweet by Michael Tracy pointing out that Bellingcat blurred out the documents as if they were porn, or like evangelicals looking at Michelangelo's David. It's like
avert your gaze. Like, no.
Well, it's like Reverend Lovejoy's wife in The Simpsons with a naked statue. And you can't see the leaks because they will damage national security. No!
Yeah, right.
So that it really speaks to their cop-like mentality and what they're actually protecting. And then helicopters over Jack Teixeira's house. Bellingcat did it. Great job, journalists. You destroyed the leaker. That's what your job is. You know, I'm a journalist. You're a journalist. We like leakers. Leakers give us information that is in the public's interest. We want leakers. Most journalists are supposed to ask leakers to provide them, you know, they put their encrypted little code up on their Twitter bio. These journalists actually hunt leakers who harm U.S. interests. These journalists, and I'm not just talking about Bellingcat, I'm talking about everyone who is involved in this and who was cheering it on. They put Ukrainian flags over their townhomes in Washington or their McMansions. They get emotional about this war. They are emotionally invested in defending Biden from embarrassment by a leaker, and they hate and fear the public. And so they are the biggest and most insidious snitches who violate everything I ever learned about what journalism was about or what attracted me to the profession. They are there to comfort the powerful and afflict the powerless. And that's what they did in targeting this 21-year-old kid. And they are funded by the US government and don't have to put that label on their Twitter account.
Go ahead.
Fundamentally, I was just going to say they view their role as protecting the public from itself, in the same way that the United States views its role in terms of geopolitics as protecting different countries from themselves, protecting their resources from them. Like, that's the role that Bellingcat plays, is just like, we're going to be the new gatekeeper. Like, don't worry. You don't have to look at these awful documents. We'll do it for you. And we'll let you know if there's anything in there that might be relevant to you.
So Alex, Eric Toller actually nailed the wrong guy first, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about Eric Toller because, he didn't, from what I can tell, live up to this reputation that Bellingcat has of being, these super skilled OSINT sleuths. So, the picture that Michael Tracy had shared where it's a screenshot of a Discord server called Minecraft Earth Map. And you can see a montage of, there's the tweet that's taken from the Discord server. It's actually screenshotting, but you can see the documents there. And he said, what did he say? He said, it looks like other people found it. And I actually saw the original tweet where, he didn't find this himself. Somebody tweeted him that screenshot, and then he just published it.
So he got a tip, and it was the wrong tip. He wasn't like using any special data OSINT skills here. It was like
somebody tweeted it at him, and
little birdie told me.
And so he went digging into this Minecraft Earth Map server, which is just like hilarious, and said, it looks like he said, what did he say? So here it is, the first. Could you go back for a moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, the first source I can find for the leaked documents, it's a Minecraft, whatever. So then I went to that same server, and the guy who, he claimed, because I saw the unredacted photo that was tweeted at Eric Toller, because here it's not just the leaked documents, but all the names of the people are blacked out. So I went into that server and I looked up messages from that individual who was supposedly the first leaker, and just found him totally freaking out, calling Eric Toller a dumbass, saying that he says, and these are just three of the screenshots, but he had like a whole bunch of messages just like freaking out over this, that where it says message cannot be loaded. That was somebody sharing Eric Toller's tweet. It can't be loaded anymore because it's been deleted. So his initial response is, "Oh, fuck off. I'm going to make a Twitter account simply to tell this dumbass to delete that. Oh, for the love of God." And it goes on and on like that for a long time too. That's just a little snapshot I took. So that's like totally hilarious. Eric Toller has now deleted the tweet because it fingered the wrong guy. Turns out that the guy who shared it in the Minecraft server got it from a different gaming server who got it from somewhere else, and that the intermediary was that channel was deleted. So it looks to me like it wasn't so much open source information that discovered the identity of the leaker, but going into Discord servers and working gamer sources. That's my impression.
Yeah, no, your impression leads us to another theory that I think is important to explore. Who is the somebody who told him? Because Bellingcat, and they've said this from the beginning, that we worry that we're eventually going to be just used by the intelligence services. When they were trying to ID the Skripal, the supposed Russian agents who went to Salisbury, England, to poison the turncoat agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia, they somehow produced the passports of those two characters. How did they get the passports? Somebody gave them to them, and that somebody could have only had access to the data at UK Customs and Migration. In other words, the intelligence services, gave it to them. And then Bellingcat got all this credit for nailing them after like back ending, like following their steps after getting like their information from the intelligence services.
Yeah,
They got,
open
like, a
source doesn't
front-page
get
profile.
you photos of passports. There's no
Exactly.
open source information you can use to get that. So, I
So
mean, and you
who
can see
really-
that it's all cover for like all the open source glorification and them being like, you know, the cyber wizards that they pretend to be. It's all just cover for you know, getting handed information from the intelligence community.
And here's Eric Toller in his own words. In general,
Yeah.
I did my best to be invited for an interview with the CIA, but no one was interested in me.
Womp, 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 womp.
Well, he found another way in, I guess, to...
He was too much of a loser for the CIA. Like,
They're asking about a conspiracy theory in Russia that you're working for the CIA. I mean, there's so many pieces about how the CIA loves Bellingcat, but this is great. And I mean, they're doing the work of the FBI here. And they are such bootlicking official snitches that when I was arrested in my own house in a SWAT style police raid in 2019, after a right-wing member of the Venezuelan opposition here in the Washington, D.C. area falsely accused me of assaulting her, a 58-year-old woman, and kicking her in the stomach, and also falsely accused your brother, Alex, Ben Rubenstein, of doing this. Ben also spent time in jail for this. I spent time in 48 hours in jail after being thrown in a wagon.
They got you on a Friday.
They got me on a Friday, so that meant I had to spend, I missed court. I missed court in the day, and I also missed Washington Nationals World Series game, but they lost. But anyway, totally false, trumped up charges. No, the police made no effort to investigate. There was no evidence for it at all. And it was because I was trying to deliver food to you and others who were in the Venezuelan embassy protesting the attempted takeover by the State Department and the Venezuelan right-wing CIA-backed opposition of that diplomatic consular facility. This woman made up this charge. Anyway, Elliot Higgins, the founder of Bellingcat, along with his neocon buddies, but he published a anonymous blog post presenting fake OSINT evidence to try to back up the case that I had assaulted a 58-year-old woman.
What the hell?
I mean, that's how sick this neocon MI6 pig is. And what a bootlicker he is, that he was trying to justify my prosecution. I mean, this was a federal prosecution. I could have gone to jail for serious time, but the feds eventually dropped the case after me. And apparently the warrant sat around for 6 months without even being authorized. So
until a Friday.
But that's Elliot Higgins. That's Bellingcat for you. Yeah. And now Bellingcat, they're literally working with the New York Times. They work for the New York Times. Christian Trebert, look at the bylines here. Christian Trebert was one of the founders of Bellingcat, and now he's the head of the New York Times digital investigation team.
Of course,
this is like how they describe their digital investigation. The airmen who gave gamers a real taste of war. So this is where they sell out Jack Teixeira with here's him being arrested. He knew they were coming. This is like a military style arrest. They got helicopters. Right. This is serious.
High power.
They brought in the local news. Yeah, high powered. Right. That's the way they arrested the Final Four at the Venezuelan embassy.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It looks a lot like that.
It was like a Waco style raid of four middle-aged hippies, basically. So yeah. Jack Teixeira cooperated. Look at the bylines on this. Okay, Eric Toller's the first byline, then Christian Trebert, who literally works for the New York Times. So you basically have spooks working for the New York Times who are funded by the U.S. government. So by proxy, the U.S. government is sponsoring the New York Times.
Yeah.
Then you have
they should get a state-affiliated media label too.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, NPR is like quit Twitter. Like, we're not government funded media. Some of our money also comes from corporations. Like, shut up.
Yeah. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Oh yeah, that really clears you. And NPR was clamoring for all of those government labels on Russian media. They led the campaign against RT and Sputnik to run them out of Washington. They hyped up Clint Watts, who lied under oath to Congress to call for nutrition labels for media and the censorship of social media. So this is just chickens coming home to roost for NPR. And I'm so glad you're gone. Get off. I want to see you quit every online forum and totally disappear. Right. I'm a big government guy, but I think we should defund NPR and use the money to build homeless shelters in San Francisco.
Honestly, this is one of Elon's finest achievements, bullying NPR off the internet. Like
the New York Times. Well, I'd like to see the New York Times quit in protest too, because they got they got their blue tick removed.
Let them all do it. You know,
National Propaganda Radio.
Seriously, nationalist.
So we're getting sidetracked, but who else is on that byline? Is Malachi Brown, he's just basically a cartoon artist who faked a crime scene in order to justify the US and UK and French bombing of Syria in 2018 over the Duma deception. This is Malachi Brown's handiwork that he won an award for this. Augmented reality. Our investigation found that the Syrian government dropped a chlorine bomb on this apartment in Syria. Then it tucked it into bed nicely. It dropped it on a bed and tucked it in this huge bomb. And the bed, for some reason, didn't break. And like anyone who showed up there wasn't exposed to it. Everything that the OPCW inspectors who actually were from the fact-finding mission wrote in their initial report that was suppressed by management was totally fake. Why? Because Malachi Brown from the New York Times produced a bunch of cartoons.
Scroll down so people can see what it looks like when you.
Well, you just scroll down and you get cartoons.
This is how I don't think it's showing. Well, it's supposed to like the image is it's like augmented reality. It's supposed to.
There we go. Oh, geez.
So this is proof, because this is the proof that Syria bombed. The Syrian government bombed this house. Because
how expensive do you think this was to make?
They came up with this NATO-centric spook. They've worked with this spook group called Forensic Architecture, which gets all these contracts with NATO cutouts to make these literal cartoons to prove that Syria did it and that the bombing was justified and that this wasn't actually an obvious deception, an obvious staged event and false flag by Saudi-backed jihadist groups. I mean, this is the most pathetic investigation I've ever seen. There's no photographic evidence.
It reminds me of like the kinds of like evidence that DAs in the Deep South drum up to like put away some guy who's got an IQ of like 65 for some murder he didn't commit. Like this is just like, yeah, well, we came up with some graph and it's like, you know, the old DNA stuff or like the forensics they would use to investigate arsons and stuff like that, where they're basically just kind of making it up. And like you see what you want to see, you know. That's my takeaway there.
That was wasn't it the Warren report where they kind of like came up with illustrations to back up the single bullet theory that Arlen Specter advanced? Like somehow the bullet went through the back of JFK's head, then turned right and like cruised around the corner.
Went through somebody's leg.
Hit John Connolly in the chest.
Right.
It's too bad Arlen Specter didn't have Malachi Brown then.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm not even done with these bylines. This is, look, you got to like really marvel. I think I'm going to be held back from the Washington Post because of their stupid paywall. I just don't have a subscription on this computer I'm using, but their piece on the Discord leaks and like nailing Jack Teixeira before the FBI could and snitching on their own literal source was published by Shane Harris. Who's Shane Harris? Just a little trivia for you all. What story is Shane Harris famous for or infamous for?
He's the what is he? The Russian bounty guy.
Exactly. You're the man.
Yeah.
So Shane Harris, he's responsible for one of the fakest stories in the past several years, the Russian bounty story, that Russia was paying bounties to the Taliban to kill U.S. soldiers, because otherwise the Taliban was like going to anoint the sores on the feet of tired U.S. soldiers and serve them tea and give them crew cuts or whatever they want. The Taliban loved the U.S. being there, and they needed Russian money in order to fight them. This was an obvious intelligence deception advanced by Shane Harris, and it's been pushed again by the New York Times in an article published 2 months ago about a fake Russian plot in Spain to mail bombs out to, I think, Spanish politicians. And it turned out it wasn't a Russian. It was a single Spanish nut job. So their story was totally fake again. So they're like piling layers of fake stories on top of each other. So Shane Harris gets to cover himself in glory by nailing a 21-year-old leaker and basically doing the work of the national security state that feeds him with all of these fake stories that he publishes.
Yeah, so all of them have been like patting themselves on the back for busting this guy. There was this Atlantic contributor, Amy Zegert, who said the real heroes were all the journalists who participated in what she called a dragnet to identify the leaker.
Because that's what journalists are supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah, here she is. This week was a different story as government investigations gears ground away. The heroes of the hunt were amateur investigators. You have to like hear this in
heroes of the hunt.
You have to hear it in an NPR voice, those soft, just grating voices. We're at a quaint saltwater taffy factory in rural New England where we're waiting for the raid. And she's saying that they're Bellingcat. Eric Toller, that the wannabe CIA agent, is the hero who tracked the migration of classified docs across Discord servers, getting it wrong initially, as Alex pointed out, and other internet platforms, and posted his findings online. Then Shane Harris got one of the members in Thug Shaker Central to speak on the record. Great job. I wonder why that guy spoke to you.
Yeah. And I mean, so the important thing to me here is like all of these people are basically cops. They want to be cops. They see themselves, whether it's, the cheerleaders, people who are just like, great job, boys. You really got them this time. Or it's the people who are really blurring the lines between journalism and intelligence work, like the New York Times and Bellingcat. All of these people see themselves as open partisans of the United States government, of kind of the West in general. And there is no sense of like, I'm going to be the neutral observer anymore. And they'll like attack me because I work for Sputnik. It's like, oh, well, you're the same thing. You like cheerlead for Russia. It's like, do you think when I go to like Cuba or Venezuela or Russia and somebody comes up to me and like criticizes the government or says, I don't agree with the war, do you think I like go turn them over to the cops? I don't do that. Real journalists don't do that. You don't inform on people for telling you things. That's just not part of the job description unless you're, in the mainstream media. Now I guess that's just par for the course.
Yeah. And Aaron Mate from an undisclosed location in Utah, Aaron Mate reminds me that the New York Times actually collaborated with Bellingcat on the Duma investigation as well, where they concluded that, yes, the government was right. The government told you the truth. So here's another role that the press played. This is amazing. It's from Glenn Greenwald's System Update, and I really recommend watching or listening to Glenn's 1 hour long rant about the press's performance in this fiasco. It's a great rant, and he just destroys them. This is John Ryder, John Ryder is the hitcher played by Rutger Hauer. This is General Ryder, or Corporal Ryder. I don't know. His name is Ryder. The press, they're really giving it to him. The press is really mad at him. Why? Why? Because the Pentagon is not cracking down hard enough and surveilling Americans. They're not cracking down hard enough on potential leakers.
Days after the leak came to light, what steps has DoD taken to reduce the number of people who have access to not only these classified briefings, but the classified material in general? You are taking steps to heighten that, I guess, population who have access to this level of information.
General Ryder, you said that there are
General Ryder.
21-year-old airman was able to access some of the nation's top secrets. How did this happen? And isn't this a massive security breach? What is your message
Do
to anyone who
something!
might be thinking of leaking these
Blur the
kinds of
images out everywhere.
Can you tell us where are there less people who have access to this type of information today than there were a week ago?
To follow on that, these documents were available long before April 5th and 6th. So what took so long
What took
for
you so long?
DOD and the intelligence communities to locate these documents?
Wow.
We don't want, they're literally saying, we don't want these documents being out there. We're the media and the people cannot see them.
Release
Right.
this airman's service record.
What technologies is the Pentagon applying right now to both spot leaked documents
Oh my
online
God.
and track potential indicators of leaking type practices?
So was there a
Do you plan
single
to be investing
reporter?
in more?
Given the
I love
asked-
that
Yeah.
up tone. Like, what technologies are you using and why aren't you doing more? It's like a really horrible form of interrogation. You're saying
So
why?
is there a single reporter there who asked them, like, why are we continuing to dump all these billions of dollars of weapons to Ukraine if we know they're losing? Is there a
Is
single reporter who asked like one critical question that actually pertained to the substance of the leaks, or did they just all just whine at him for not having discovered this kid faster or something?
Go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say what I've observed over the years, whether it's the Pentagon or the State Department or the White House, is that there's two kinds of reporters that ask critical questions. One, the first would be employees for Russia Today or Sputnik. And then the second would be Matt Lee with the Associated Press.
Matt Lee,
But
who's sitting
I
in
can't tell
Helen
you-
Thomas. Matt Lee's sitting in Helen Thomas's chair.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the traditional token person who
Yeah.
asks tough questions that, shows that we're a democracy.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen a press briefing for whether it be the UN or the Pentagon, where the Russian reporter opens up with a tough critical question, and that makes the space for all the other reporters in the room to start asking follow-ups or questions with some kind of at least a tint of criticism or a tint of actually seeking the truth. But until that Russian reporter opens up the space for that, nobody says anything that could be.
There were these glory years when they had Guyan Chikian as the RT America State Department correspondent, and she would ask all the tough questions. And John Kirby, once he just completely lost it on her. I'm sure we could find it. And he just started attacking her personally and attacking her as a Russian. Actually, she's from Georgia. And you could see the other reporters got upset, and Matt Lee defended her. Yeah. But there's so many great moments of John Kirby just sputtering and not knowing what to say under Guyan's tough questioning. And now they're not allowed to be there. I mean, that's one of the reasons that they had to get RT out of there. Yeah. So I also remember after the Duma deception, when Trump was briefly hesitating to authorize bombing, and in the Rose Garden, he gave a press conference. Remember when presidents used to give press conferences? And the whole Beltway press corps was like, children are dying, children are dead. What are you going to do? Will you authorize tough action to punish this slaughter of children and women? Every single one. None of them were questioning whether this could have been staged. Like, that's not allowed. If you know the Beltway press corps, if you live in DC, you know these people. They have a subculture that exists completely apart from the rest of society. They hang out with each other. They take care of each other's kids. They live in affluent neighborhoods that are off limits to most people. They put Ukrainian flags on their houses.
They bring their children to bars.
Yeah, they do that. I see that on Capitol Hill a lot. And they are just emotionally invested in this war. This war is their war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, because first of all, like they're all liberals, so
Yeah.
they're not allowed to feel like really like bloodthirsty about wars against brown people. But like finally, they have the opportunity to like really let it all out because it's it's like they're Russians, like they're not really white because now they're considered like enemies of the state on site.
Yeah.
But like they're an acceptable target for all that like pent up racist hatred that liberals hold on to. And no, I mean that was the Syria airstrike. That was the moment when they learned to tolerate Trump. You remember Brian Williams saying, "I am guided by." He was quoting Leonard Cohen. He said, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons," and like obviously completely missing the point of the song. But like, just
it's not.
It's like quoting like War Pigs from Black Sabbath
exactly
for a pro-war message.
It's like quoting Dylan's Masters of War and being
like,
we truly are masters of war tonight.
That's what makes us so great.
I remember after the raid in Yemen that Trump authorized that wound up killing a bunch of kids in some in like Hodeidah or something.
Yeah.
In a bunch of supposed Al-Qaeda families. Trump recognized one of the special forces soldiers that got wounded in the raid during his State of the Union, and Van Jones responded. His response to Trump's State of the Union in that moment was, "Tonight, Trump truly became president." Like Van Jones.
Van Jones, the Maoist, the teenage Maoist.
Yeah, I was going to say he's like the opposite of like that Tennessee lawmaker where he went from like radical
Pearson's?
to like he's like the inverse of that.
Yeah.
Justin Pearson, I love that guy. I mean, I agree with him on guns, by the way, but anyway, Van Jones, yes. Van Jones went from being part of a Maoist organization in Oakland, which based its theories on Guinea-Bissauan revolutionaries, to a CNN pundit praising Trump's raid on brown people in Yemen as presidential. So there's a perfect example of the Beltway press corps.
Can you show the pictures? I can send it to you.
Yeah, just put it in the chat.
It really speaks to the beauty of the American experiment, that Van Jones can go from Maoist rebel to CNN contributor.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Not to rip off Mike Pompeo too badly, but
as
reminds you of the beauty of the American experiment. That's what he said. We lied, we cheated, we stole.
As Don King said, only in America. Only in America could this be a CNN contributor. Here's Van at an answer rally. Well, I mean, and it's perfect. Barack Obama spoke at an anti-war rally. I mean, he was like much more guarded than Van Jones probably was. He was like, "This is a stupid war. It's not the right war. Look, let me be clear. There's some good wars, but this is not a good war." And it was, to get a seat in Hyde Park, which is a very progressive district.
Yeah.
Van Jones, he really played his cards right.
Let's see. I thought that was a video. I thought we were going to hear like a really barnstorming.
I wish.
I have another video of Justin Pearson teed up. This is the Tennessee representative who's the like toast of liberal America right now. Again, he was screwed over by the Republicans, and I agree with him that, assault weapons, need to be regulated. But he didn't always start his career out as a prophetic revolutionary. This is him during the Obama era when he was first entering politics.
And I'm running for president of BSG. There are a few reasons that we're running this campaign this year. One has to do with representation. How can we represent all voices in a conversation? I wanted to do this by partnering with organizations from the Bowdoin Democrats to the Bowdoin Republicans. I want to bring together.
He's like Obama. He's post-partisan, and he's bringing both sides together across the aisle to come together for the better future of tomorrow and our children.
They're different voices, dissenting voices that may be more liberal or more conservative, in order that we can reach a point of sort of the radical middle.
NRA and gun lobbyists might win.
Actually,
wow.
Today.
Good news for us. I don't know how long this Saturday in the state of Tennessee might last, but we have good news, folks. We've got good news that Sunday always comes.
Justin J. Pearson.
Wow.
And I'm running.
Oh, quite a transformation.
Tucker had
quite
an
a few
excellent.
letters from an Alabama jail.
It's kind of like a reverse Van Jones.
Yeah. Tucker
Great
had an
MLK
excellent segment the
impersonation.
other night of just all the politicians that have done that kind of thing. He had multiple of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one doing a black speech, the other doing Latina speech. Hillary Clinton doing the Southern thing back in the day.
Oh yeah,
that was particularly.
Oh my
good.
God.
Yeah, he had a whole history of it.
Christ.
Yeah, I mean, they're politicians, they're actors. I mean, it's what Hollywood for ugly people, as they say. But sometimes it gets kind of ridiculous. And I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, the biggest tool of the Israel lobby, Democratic minority leader in the House. I mean, just complete rubber stamp for AIPAC, corporate America. It's just come out that his father was a major figure in the Nation of Islam and was a Farrakhan supporter. So you just kind of see where it comes from. If you want to make it in American politics, you have to constantly overcompensate. Kamala Harris's father was a Marxist. Pete Buttigieg's father was was the head of the Gramsci
translator.
Yeah, he was a Gramsci scholar. So they're just completely overcompensating. See that there was this show in the 80s, you all might not have been alive then, called Family Ties, and it was about this hippie family that became middle class or upper middle class. And so they were like Volvo driving liberals, and the son rebels against the father. The son was Michael J. Fox. It was like his big role after Back to the Future. And he was Alex P. Keaton. He was a college conservative. He dressed like Tucker, and the Alex P. Keaton of today is a liberal, is like a blue and on liberal, or they work in the Beltway media. Like the people who love the establishment more than the establishment loves itself are liberals. They're Democrats. It's like it's the uncool party. They don't even have like a wing that fucks with power. They don't have like some Marjorie Taylor Greene who makes people angry. Like,
no, they have the wing that like pantomimes it. We have this squad that just like delivers their little weekly performance, outrage porn, whatever. And then they go silent and they never actually vote for anything or do anything useful or withhold their votes for anything.
How many years after Assange's arrest have they decided to actually write a strongly worded letter? And presumably asking no Republicans to sign it because there were
why didn't they get MTG's signature on there?
Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, where are they?
Right.
I don't know. I haven't seen any reporting about that. The Intercept article, which broke the story, had nothing. And I would even add that some of the people, Ro Khanna, for example, was expected to sign. He didn't. What happened there? We don't know.
It kind of reminds me also of like, it's not just liberals. It's like elements of the left, like in Ottawa when the truckers shut down the city and emergency law was declared and bank accounts were seized by Justin Trudeau, the World Economic Forum pet project, and Chrystia Freeland. A bunch of like social democrats who fashioned themselves as radicals got together and did a people's blockade to confront the truckers. And they literally became Justin Trudeau's street shock troops. And like,
it's the same thing Antifa did in DC after January 6th. There were like protests in support of the prisoners, and Antifa showed up and basically, did the Capitol Police's job for them. I mean, same thing with communist groups that were calling for sedition charges against them.
Which is so bizarre.
Like the far left, the people that
you wanted to overthrow the government.
Yeah, the people that get really offended if you call them liberals because they consider themselves far left are in fact, doing more than the liberals. You see it with Bellingcat. A lot of Bellingcat's reader base has been Antifa people.
Yep.
For years now, and so it's just it's just
and they're contributors.
Optics,
and they're contributors.
Yeah, that Chris Evans guy, I think his name was. He was very pro Antifa. I don't think he's with them anymore, but I did see him mocking the leaker with the screenshot of the helicopter circling over his house. So I mean that it just tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, totally. Or the Antifa character Oz Chatterjee, who somehow wound up testifying before the House of Lords on Syria.
And
praised the
donated,
cops for shackling me literally putting shackles on my wrists and ankles. After
Is
I
he
was
the one who
arrested on
sent
false
you
charges.
the insane voice message?
That was Idris
oh
Ahmad,
no.
who's a
Oh,
professor
no,
at
I'm
Sterling
right.
University.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
No, he sent me threatening. Both of these characters sent me threatening voice messages, and Oz Chatterjee sent me threatening WhatsApp messages from an anonymous account somehow after getting my phone number before I published an investigative expose of the US and UK government and intelligence-backed Syrian white helmets.
Yeah.
So they somehow had gained wind that I was publishing this expose and sought to threaten me. This also speaks to the mentality we're talking about. Defend US and UK intelligence from being exposed by a journalist by threatening the journalist before they published. One of these people, Idris Ahmad, he's a professor of journalism at Stirling University in Scotland. And I published I'll play it now. I published the audio of him threatening me against publishing factual journalism, and his university did nothing.
Right.
I was getting so many threatening calls. I knew that I got ready to record because I knew this was going to be another one. And this is who they are, and they're all spooks in one way or another.
You think I'm going to let you go?
Who is it?
Mehdi Hassan.
Jesus.
You think you can talk me? You coward?
Who's this?
You motherfucker. I'm going to tell you who I am, okay? I'm going to tell you who I am. You piece of motherfucking shit.
So this is him, Idris Ahmad. That's who is threatening me against publishing journalism. He's written pieces praising Bellingcat for the New York Review of Books. And now he's at New Lines, which is this spook publication that, you just look at New Lines. It's such an obvious spook publication. And their
call it Rat Lines.
Rat Lines. That's a great name for it. And their top funder is something called Sawari Chicken Farms. They're funded through a poultry farm, which in highly unusual stuff. And they're run out of this diploma mill that's affiliated with Islamist groups. It's weird stuff. And all they do is run cover for spook operations in Washington.
Right.
So these are the people we've been dealing with for years, trying to, and they've all been circling around Bellingcat, which was gestated by the intelligence services, supported by the NED, and is now involved in basically being Bellingcop, acting like cops.
Within the course of 2 weeks, claiming that a journalist is a legitimate target and then helping the feds track down a leaker. That's just the past 2 weeks.
Right. And they're just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think the other thing that we really have to, put it in a context with Bellingcat is that their main thing is trying to be an alternative to WikiLeaks, to discredit WikiLeaks' methods and to provide an alternative, the cool journalists, like the cool kids club of journalists that isn't unfriendly to U.S. government interests. That's their whole thing. Laundering intelligence through supposed journalism and making WikiLeaks look bad in comparison. And if you go to their website, you can see that, I think Elliot Higgins had some quotes where he talked about they were the people's WikiLeaks or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's like their whole aesthetic. It's like kind of a Vice News thing where they're trying to make it seem subversive to go around like undermining governments that are targeted by the U.S. Like,
yeah, like it's an anarchist thing.
Yeah.
They all just happen to be Atlantic Council fellows, and they're only targeting governments that the U.S. wants to target. But it's Antifa, because those governments are the true fascists.
I mean, you see this like alliance over and over again between Antifa and these like spook adjacent journalists. Like, for example, Jared Holt, he was running a publication called Hate Watch, which was like the preeminent publication of so-called anti-fascism, where they just like put out all these hit pieces against, it was like what the Southern Poverty Law Center does. I'm sorry, it was called Right Wing Watch. And they, not hate Watch is the SPLCs, but, they would do pieces about Tucker's, advertisers. They do pieces about these like fringe organizers of far right protests. And they were like leading in that field. And then Jared Holt gets a job with the Atlantic Council at their digital forensic research lab, which is just like filled to the brim with spooks. And you see it. So you just see it over and over again.
Yeah. And they work with Bellingcat and are part of all of these consortiums, so-called disinformation consortiums. Right. But he pals around with leftists, like top leftist journalists and in DC, and I mean, presents himself as some kind of fighter of fascism.
While working for the Atlantic Council. It's
literally working for the Atlantic Council. And it's
I gotta hop off, guys.
All
but
right.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm gonna interrupt anyway. But it's been good hopping on with you guys, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think this will probably be a good place to leave off. I was gonna go deeper down the rabbit hole, but we've been rolling for an hour and a half, and Aaron is still on the road, so we're gonna welcome Aaron back next Friday and see you all then. But we really appreciate Wyatt Reed and Alex Rubenstein jumping in and making this a really great discussion on the enemy of the people, the corporate media. So thanks a lot, and thank you all for being a part of it. Thanks for all the super chats and your support. Thanks for hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We are heavily suppressed by the Google-owned YouTube. So thanks for that. And you'll be able to catch segments of this discussion and others if you're in LA or New York on Pacifica Radio 90.7 and LA KPFK on Tuesday at 5 p.m. and WBAI New York 99.5 on Sunday at 6 p.m. Also, check out my podcast, Anchor FM, Spotify, and there's a lot of content there. Anything you all want to shout out before we go?
You can catch me on Twitter. Look me up at Wyatt Reed 13. I think I am no longer shadow banned / search banned. So I believe you should be able to find me now on Twitter again.
Nice.
You can check out my Telegram, Wyatt Reed, and my Substack, wyattreed.substack.com. Keep up to date on what I'm publishing.
Yeah, just to bring it back to the documents really quickly, Fox News has said that they and other publishers have agreed not to publish the actual leaks themselves, only talk about what's in them. So again, going back to how everything's being filtered through these editorial boards, the Grayzone has not made any such agreement. We don't know who they are making these agreements with, these publishers, but you can find my email address if you have access to these documents. It's Alex Ruby, that's R-U-B-I, real R-E-A-L, at protonmail.com if you have them. I'd be happy to look at that or any other information you might want to share.
Right on. And I got a new piece up at the Grayzone on just what a complete sham the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has become. So check that out. And it's especially important with the BRICS meeting coming up in South Africa, because the NATO states are trying to enact the ICC warrant against Putin to prevent BRICS from meeting, and they're going to be discussing de-dollarization there. So check that out. Thanks a lot, GDNPB. And all right, Wyatt, we'll let you go. We'll let you all go. And everyone have a good night, good week, and a good weekend. We'll see you here next week with Aaron Mate. Peace.
Later.